So guys, there's a ton of filmmaking gear out there, and some of it's really fancy, some of it's really cool,
And as a YouTuber, you occasionally get sent this stuff to take a look at, but for one reason or the other, or maybe just a time constraint of getting the video out on time, you can't always get your total thoughts or like a true long-term review in, which is what I'm trying to do here, is taking a look at some of this budget filmmaking gear that I've received over the last year and seeing, is any of it really worth it? How's it holding up? So this is kind of just going to be like a random assortment of cheap filmmaking gear that could be great for you guys.
the Nitecore electric blower. So this was one of those things that I never thought I would get. I was like, I'm just gonna use the rubber blowers forever. But once I finally got this thing sent to me and I used it for a little while, I actually was incredibly impressed by how much I enjoyed the experience of this electronic blower and how effective it really was. So I was pretty much completely positive in that review, but from a long-term perspective, I have to say one thing, which is it doesn't work anymore. So this is a classic example of letting the battery run all the way down and not charging it. So partial user error, but what I think happened was it got turned on in my bag, burnt itself all the way down to 0, and then I didn't notice and didn't charge it forever. When I went to use it, it didn't work. When I went to charge it, it wouldn't charge. So Nitecore electronic blower is really great. I really enjoyed my experience using it when it worked, but unfortunately it doesn't work anymore. So that's my long-term review of that. Next up was the Shimbol Memory 1. I was really impressed with this monitor for sure. I think it works really great. It's got a really great price, and that internal recording for content creation or a backup recording or whatever you can think of to use it for is a really neat bonus feature for this monitor. I really do enjoy it, and I do recommend it still, but it's been overshadowed a little bit by a monitor later in this thing, which costs more money, but has a feature that I'm gonna use pretty consistently. So yeah, Shimbol Memory 1, I really enjoy this little monitor, but you know, it's got a bigger brother that might be better for some people than others. But if you're a YouTuber, you're trying to record your menu, your settings, your overlay on your camera screen, or you just want this, like, even if it's a lower quality backup recording on this monitor, it's really great. I do think the biggest thing holding that monitor back is the fact that when you use the recording, it turns off a lot of the monitoring features. So you kind of got to use it as a monitor or a recorder and not both. And obviously the recording settings are not anything like a professional recorder like the Ninja V would have. The Andycine V-mount and Smallrig V-mount system literally changed my life. I use this V-mount setup on pretty much every shoot I do. The compact, foldable, with the chest pad, Smallrig, it just really, really works for how I shoot and my setups and my smaller camera systems like the S5 II and the GH6. And the Andycine V-mount is really, really solid. It's been overshadowed a little bit by the Rolex batteries, but those are much more expensive. And, you know, I think the biggest thing holding the Andycine back is the USB-C is not quite enough for power delivery, but if you're gonna use a D-tap and dummy batteries and things like that, it definitely works really, really well. Next up is Dehancer. This isn't a product, but I still felt like I should talk about it. And the reality is, from a long-term standpoint, I don't really use it that much, and that's mostly because I have a bad computer. It's a kind of old 2019 MacBook. It's the last like Intel chip MacBook. And yeah, it just is a little too heavy on my system. If I had a little bit better of a computer, I definitely want to use it more often. I used Film Convert before Dehancer, so switching over is kind of a big commitment, you know? Okay, now we have the whole Shimbol transmitter setup. So this is kind of what supplanted the Memory 1 for me. It just, I don't know, it has the same recording feature as the Memory 1, but it also has a built-in receiver and transmitter function inside the monitor. If you want to use it for sending to iOS devices and things like that, great. You can also buy the transmitter receiver system, and that works really well too. So I can't recommend that enough for people who want, you know, a monitor, a recorder, a transmitter receiver that can send up to like 3 or 4 devices at once. It's just crazy how versatile that setup is. So yeah, I use those all the time on all types of sets, music videos, anything narrative, client work for corporate things. They're just really, really useful. So yeah, if you even think you're gonna need to make some kind of video village or director's monitor setup, this might be a better option than Memory One. But if you just want to record your screen and make content and things like that, the Memory One is really, really handy. The GVM 300b. This is a really, really solid 300 watt bicolor light from Great Video Maker, who typically has made pretty underwhelming stuff. And yeah, I have been loving this light. The effects, the bicolor, the output. I've used this on some big music video projects. I've used this for a lot of interviews, and just having these, it's just a really, really incredible value for a production light. So yeah, really solid work there for GVM. I highly recommend watching my video on that. The FreeWell ND version 2, I always wondered if these magnetic ND filters were worth it or were as handy as they could be. And shooting weddings where the ND filters are coming on and off and on and off, and just having this threaded onto your lens, ready to slap the ND on, slap it off, put these filters on, take them off. And on top of being just a really high quality ND, probably the highest quality ND I've used for variable NDs anyway, I couldn't be happier with this ND, and it really is something that I use on essentially every shoot at this point. So yeah, can't recommend that enough for filmmakers. The price is great. Yeah, it's really solid. It's my favorite or second favorite ND at this point. The Andycine A6 II. I think this is a great monitor. I love the form factor, the features, the build, but at the end of the day, I think the Shimbol monitors are just a little bit better now. I think the image from this is great, so if you need just a monitor, fantastic. This is probably what you should get. But if you ever think you're gonna want that internal memory recording or the transmission or any of that other fancy stuff from Shimbol, I think the Andycine is not as good of an option. Although the price is really good and the image for actually monitoring your footage is great. Like the punch-in on the Andycine is way better than the punch-in on the Shimbol or the Memory One, any of that stuff from Shimbol. So it's hit or miss, it's hard to say for sure, but I do think this is a good monitor, although there's some weird issues with 4K 60 and it might not always work. So if you shoot a ton of 4K 60, sometimes it'll work, like on my GH6, and other times, like on the S5 Mark II, it just didn't. So very strange. Shimbol said it's not designed to work with 4K 60 output, so be careful, I guess. And next up is that little Ulanzi light right here. I really love this light. I even went out and bought the little softbox for it, and you'll actually see a lot of my recent YouTube videos using that softbox. So I think it's a great little light. I think it does really, really fantastic work. It's bright enough for a lot of things. It's great for products. I put it at my desk all the time for little YouTube videos. I'll use it as a little fill light for like a corporate interview sort of thing, occasionally, just to get a little fill and a little catch light in the eyes, especially with that new mini softbox that I purchased for it. The stand is really fantastic. So as a portable light for like street, like, you know, going out on the street with a model, or putting a little tiny light in a small place and having a little softbox on it, yeah, I use it all the time. I'm a little worried about the internal battery going out. Like anything with an internal battery, it's always gonna be a possibility or even an inevitability given a long enough time period. But so far that hasn't happened yet. So anyway, guys, hopefully some of these random reviewing of my reviews over the last year or so has been interesting or helpful to you. I didn't want to talk about Film Convert because, you know, I use it all the time. I'm using it probably on this video as well. But I was sponsored to make that video. I didn't just get it for free. Actually, I had already purchased it, but I did get sponsored to make that video. And so it didn't quite feel right to put that on this list. But hopefully some of these random filmmaker gear reviews and long-term thoughts helped a little bit. And if it did, be sure to subscribe. And if you did subscribe, I will see you when I see you. All right, take it easy.